What's up, guys? Greg here. Welcome back to the shop. This is part 2 of our Magnuson Supercharger installation. Now, if you guys watched part 1, we got the valve covers off the engine, but we need to make some necessary cuts that require a bandsaw. I'm actually going to end up taking these over to a buddy's shop today where he's got one to make the necessary cuts. We got to get them taped up, so let's get that done and hit the road. All right, guys, well, we're here at my buddy Mike's shop. He's the guy with the right tools with the bandsaw. Him and I just went ahead and swapped the blade over to a metal blade. We've got both of our valve covers taped up, ready to go. We're gonna start cutting. You ready to show me how to use this thing?
Let's do it.
All right. All right, guys, well, that was pretty effortless using the proper tool for the job. Mike, I can't thank you enough again. Thanks for schooling me on how to use this thing, and we appreciate the help.
Dude, my pleasure.
All right. Now, we got to ride back to our shop. We'll get this car finished up. All right, guys, we're back in our shop. Time to get these valve covers cleaned up, get these coil relocation brackets mounted, and get them back on the car. There it goes. All right, guys, moment of truth. Supercharger is going on. I got a friend to help you with this because it is heavy and can be very difficult for trying to do it by yourself. All right, guys, right now what I'm doing is actually prepping the bolts for bolting the Supercharger down to the motor. And Magnuson gives you all the bolts, and you have to install these washers on there as well. And the washers, once they're installed, are going to get a small dab of this grease because there's actually a little rubber O-ring on each and every one of them. So you want to make sure that's lubricated. Once that's done, put some Loctite on each and every one of these bolts and get them installed. And then I'll show you the very specific torque procedure that Magnuson asks you to do to get this thing torqued down to the top of the engine. But I'm going to put a small amount of grease, as they stated, just to the underside. All right, now I'm just going to apply a little bit of blue Loctite to each bolt. Oh, a little bit too much there. Oh, a little bit too much there too. To start, I'm just going to get all these bolts in there and started to make sure everything is properly centered. And then we will go through in the correct torque sequence that Magnuson recommends. All right, guys, so this is the torque sequence that needs to be followed when bolting the supercharger down to the engine itself. Notice, however, they're all numbered. Start with number 1, move to number 2, and so on. We're gonna do that to make sure that this gets torqued down exactly how it should. Now, I'm gonna be progressing little by little, tighter and tighter and tighter as I go around. Finally, I'll be torquing it to 106 inch-pounds. Right now, I'm just getting them kind of snugged up. Move to 2, go across to 3. And one back up over here, 4. So I've got everything essentially snugged down. Now we're gonna go and do the exact same thing again, with just increasing the torque. So 1, 2, 3. As they stated, we did 3 rounds, progressively tightening. Now we're going to torque everything to exactly the correct spec, which is 106 inch-pounds. All right, guys, time to do some wiring. Magnuson gives you a lot of extension harnesses for the factory harnesses that are not going to reach. We're going to start with this map sensor extension harness, get that plugged in, and then we can route it back here to the new map sensor. I'm going to do the same thing with the EVAP extension harness. Like that. And this actually has to get routed underneath the supercharger. All right, guys, our Magnuson supercharger is bolted to the engine and I am getting excited. Now that that's done, we can move on to mounting our intercooler, or also known as a low temperature radiator, to the front of the car and start doing all of the plumbing. This is one of the major things you have to do to install the new intercooler, is remove and relocate the horns in the front. All right, guys, now what we're gonna do is rivet the new brackets to the intercooler or low temperature radiator. You will need a rivet gun to do this. One. There's 2. Slide nice and easy. Or not. Goes. Get the lower brackets on, loosely on. 2 nuts on the back side of these studs. All right, guys, remember how I said that the horn was one of the biggest things that got in the way for this intercooler? Well, they provide you with a new bracket that sneaks it out of the way just enough. All right, right now I'm removing two 15mm bolts on the frame rail because there's a bracket that we actually have to put in place there. Kind of difficult to get to, but gear wrenches help. All right, guys, so this is our pump for our intercooler, and this is what that bracket that we just installed is for. So I'm gonna fish this down here somehow, some way. I don't know how. There we go. Fish this down here, and this rubber isolator is going to then slide over the bracket that we just put in. All right, guys, what I'm doing is just putting a very thin layer of grease on the inside of some of the plumbing and some of the hoses for the intercooler, just to make it a lot easier to have them slide on. This is going to go on to the lower fitting on the low temperature radiator or the intercooler in the front. All right. Get this new bracket onto our intercooler reservoir. All right, guys, now we're gonna mount the reservoir for our low temperature radiator by just unbolting this brace really quickly. And then this provided bracket on the reservoir is going to install right here. Okay, guys, now we're hooking up the hose to the pump inlet on the top, which will go like so, over to our reservoir right here. All right, guys, so I took the evap solenoid off the original intake manifold, and we're swapping it over. Brake booster vacuum. Install there. So, down there, and then all right, guys, now we're going to start with the wiring harness for our intercooler pump, and it's this connector that's going to power it. So I'm going to get this routed under the frame rail first. It's not going to stay here, but that's where we're going to start. This outer stud is to mount our relay. I'm going to pop the fuse into here. Cover back on. Route that under here. Perfect. To power the harness, so we're going to hook it up right here to the fuse block to get it power for the relay, and then connect it. Here's our guy. All right, to complete this harness, we're just going to hook up the ground connection to the factory ground right here. All All right, guys, rags can come out because the charge air coolers are going back in. Oop. Ow, pinch me. I always try to just use a little bit when too much comes out. Yeah, see? I'll tell you guys. Same as the last bolts. Put a little Loctite on each one. Try and get this centered up a little bit with just the one. Okay. All right, guys, once again, we have a very specific torque pattern that we need to follow for the lid of the supercharger. So I'm gonna follow that and start it now. Just gonna get everything close to snug and then go back and torque each of them down, just getting progressively tighter. All right, guys, now I'm gonna go back and officially torque all these bolts. One. Two. Four. All right. So this is the new intake elbow that Magnuson gives you with the kit, and it's a lot shorter than the stock and a lot shorter than even the one that we had for our Rotofab intake. It's designed to work with the factory airbox. Now we have the factory airbox, but I really want to try to get that Rotofab airbox to work, so let's see if we can get this fitted up. All right, guys, as much as it pains me, the Rotofab intake is not going to work, so stock airbox is going to have to go back in for now until we get a replacement for it. All right, guys, we got everything buttoned up under the hood. Now it's time to upgrade the software for our new supercharger installation, which I have the new file from Magnuson on this laptop. We're gonna start programming that now. All right, guys, that's it. New software is updated, state's completed. New tune is in. All right, guys, we are minutes away to finally firing this thing up. Now, the next big step is going to be topping off both the engine cooling system and the supercharger cooling system with coolant and bleeding them out. And that's exactly why I've left the front clip of the car off. If there are any leaks whatsoever with this intercooler, I want to be able to see them. Once I know it's all good, we can put the whole front end back together and we're going to go for an epic test drive. Now the key to bleeding out the low temperature radiator for the supercharger is to fill up the reservoir and then turn the key on for intervals of 5 seconds to initiate the pump. This is going to help bleed all the air out of the cooling system, and we're going to have to repeat this process a few times until all the air is out. Moment of truth, guys.